Before the world knew his name, before the numbers and headlines and impossible wealth, there was one thing Elias Rowan had never managed to buy: a love that stayed when the spotlight was gone. He had everything people dream about, until one ordinary cup of coffee introduced him to a woman who didn't care who he was, only how he listened. This is not a story about money. It's about choice. About a billionaire who learned that the rarest luxury isn't power or privilege. It's loving someone who asks you to show up with nothing but your heart. Before we get into the juicy details, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more romantic stories. Elias Rowan learned early that money had a sound. It rustled like silk contracts, chimed in crystal glasses, hummed in the quiet confidence of private rooms. It was a sound people leaned toward, people smiled for. Lena Hart, on the other hand, had a laugh that cut through rooms without asking permission. It wasn't polished, it was warm and sudden, like a window thrown open on a spring morning. Elias heard it first, before he saw her. While standing in line for coffee, he absolutely didn't need to be buying himself. She was arguing with the barista about oat milk foam. Not angry, passionate, joyfully stubborn. "Look," she said, smiling like she'd already won. "I promise I'm not asking for much. Just cloud-level foam." Elias smiled into his sleeve, unnoticed. When it was his turn, he ordered the same thing. The barista rolled her eyes. Lena turned, startled, and then laughed again, this time at him. "Solidarity?" she asked. "Scientific curiosity," Elias said. "I wanted to see if the cloud was real." "It is," she said, "but only if you believe." They sat at the same small table because the cafe was full, and because neither of them moved. They talked about unimportant things, favorite city benches, the best time of day to walk without headphones, how some books felt like homes you could revisit. Elias didn't mention the foundation he ran or the buildings with his name etched into marble. Lena didn't ask what he did. It was perfect. Days folded into weeks the way soft letters fold into envelopes. They met in ordinary places, bookstores, parks, a bakery that burned everything but somehow got away with it. Elias wore simpler clothes. Lena wore paint on her hands sometimes. She taught art classes at a community center and lived in an apartment with windows that caught the sunset just right. He loved how she noticed small things, the way a chipped mug told a story, how a plant leaned toward kindness, how silence could be companionable instead of awkward. She loved how he listened, not waited, listened. When Elias finally told her the truth, it was on a Sunday afternoon with rain tapping politely at the window. "There's something I should say," he began. She looked up from her sketchbook. "You always say that before you tell me something gentle." He laughed, relieved. "I'm very wealthy." She blinked. Once. Then smiled. "Oh," she said. "Is that all?" He frowned. "That's all." "I wondered why you tip like you're apologizing to the universe," she said. "But money's not a personality trait, Elias." It was the first time anyone had said his name like that, like it belonged to a person, not a headline. Their love grew without spectacle. No grand gestures. No diamonds catching the sun. Just mornings where she left notes on his fridge and evenings where he learned how to burn dinner exactly the way she liked it. He funded the community center anonymously. She suspected. She never asked. One evening, walking hand in hand under a sky too pink to be practical, Elias stopped. "There's something I want," he said, voice steady but heart loud. Lena squeezed his fingers. "Okay. I want a life that looks like this," he said. "Not the one people expect from me. I want mornings with you. Ordinary worries. Shared plans." She studied his face carefully, like she was sketching him in her mind. "And what does that mean?" she asked softly. He took a breath. "It means choosing us. Fully." Lena smiled, but it trembled at the edges. "Elias," she said, "there's something I need to tell you too." The sky shifted, clouds rearranging themselves like they were holding their breath. She opened her mouth, and his phone buzzed in his pocket, insistent, interrupting the moment just as her fingers tightened around his. He hesitated, torn between the sound and the woman in front of him. "Don't answer it," she said gently. "Just listen first." Elias nodded, slipping the phone back, heart pounding. "I've been offered something," Lena began. "Something that could change everything." She looked at him, eyes bright and uncertain, love and possibility colliding in her gaze. And just as she took a breath to continue, the rain began to fall, soft, hopeful, unfinished. Lena laughed quietly as the rain picked up, holding her sketchbook to her chest like it might run away. "Of course it rains now," she said. "Big moments always summon weather." Elias smiled, though his heart was still racing. "I like rain," he said. "It makes people honest." They stepped under the awning of a closed flower shop, surrounded by buckets of unsold blooms. The air smelled like roses and damp pavement. Lena brushed a strand of hair from her face, clearly buying herself a second of courage. "I was offered a residency," she said finally. 6 months. Florence. Elias didn't speak, not because he was hurt, but because he wanted to make room for the truth instead of rushing to fill the silence. "They saw my work online," she continued. "A gallery connected to a teaching studio. It's everything I dreamed about when I was 20 and didn't know how bills worked." "That's incredible," he said, meaning it completely. She searched his face. "You're not disappointed?" "I'm proud," he said, "and a little afraid of how much I want to stand in your way without meaning to." Her eyes softened. "That's what scares me too." The rain slowed, as if giving them privacy. Elias took her hands, thumbs tracing familiar paths over her knuckles. "I don't want you to choose between me and yourself," he said. "If loving you means letting you grow, then that's what I'll do." Lena swallowed. "And if growing means learning how to love across distance, then we learn," he said. "Together." She laughed then, relieved, bright, full of tears she refused to let fall. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "You know," she said, "most people assume someone like you would try to solve this with money." "I could buy a plane," he said lightly, "or a view of the Arno." She pulled back, smiling. "See? That's exactly what I mean." He laughed too, surrendering. "Fair." They stayed there until the sky cleared, until the street lights blinked on one by one. When they finally walked again, their steps were slower, thoughtful, like they were already memorizing each other in case memory had to carry them for a while. At Lena's building, she stopped, keys in hand. "There's more," she said softly. Elias raised an eyebrow, amused and attentive. "There's always more with you." She hesitated, then smiled, a smile that felt like a promise and a question all at once. "If I go," she said, "I don't want this to be a pause." His breath caught. "Then what do you want it to be?" She leaned closer, voice barely above the hum of the city. "I want it to be the beginning of something bigger than either of us planned." Elias opened his mouth to answer, and she reached into her bag, pulling out an envelope with his name written across it in ink he recognized instantly. "Read this," she said. "Tomorrow morning." "Why not now?" he asked. "Because," she said, stepping back toward her door, eyes shining. "If you read it now, neither of us will sleep." She disappeared inside, leaving him alone on the steps with the envelope warm in his hands, his future folded neatly inside paper he hadn't yet dared to open. Upstairs, a light flicked on. Elias looked up. Lena stood at the window, watching him, waiting. And suddenly, for the first time in his life, Elias Rowan, who owned cities, companies, and time itself, realized the next choice he made might be the richest one of all. Elias didn't open the envelope until morning, just as she asked. Sunlight spilled across his kitchen in quiet confidence, catching on the corners of a life he'd built carefully, and a life that suddenly felt ready to be rearranged. He made coffee he didn't drink, stood by the window he rarely noticed, and finally slid his finger beneath the seal. The paper smelled faintly of paint and lavender soap. "Elias, if you're reading this, it means I didn't lose my nerve. Please appreciate the miracle. Florence is a chance, yes, but it isn't an escape. I don't want a life that happens away from you. I want one that grows with you, even if it stretches a little first. I love you for who you are when no one is watching, for how you listen, for how you never try to shine brighter than the moment deserves. So here's the truth I couldn't say out loud last night. I don't want 6 months apart unless we're walking toward something together. If you want a future that's ordinary and brave and ours, Meet me tonight at the cafe where we first shared cloud-level foam. If not, I'll still go to Florence grateful, because loving you has already made me more than I was. L. Elias laughed once, a soft, disbelieving sound, and felt something in his chest settle into place. That evening, Lena arrived at the cafe first. She chose the same small table. Her hands trembled just enough to annoy her. She told herself she'd be fine either way, and almost believed it. Then the bell above the door rang. Elias walked in without hesitation. No envelope, no grand speech prepared. Just him. He ordered 2 coffees. Oat milk. Extra foam. He sat down across from her and smiled the smile she knew, the one that meant he was all in. "I read the letter," he said. "And?" she asked, trying to sound casual and failing beautifully. "And I realized something," he said. "I've spent my life investing in futures that looked impressive from a distance. I want one that looks like mornings with you." Her breath caught. "I can work from anywhere," he continued. "I can live anywhere. But loving you? That's not flexible. That's fixed." Lena's eyes filled, and she laughed through it. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying," he said gently, "go to Florence. I'll come with you for part of it. You come back with me after. We don't put our lives on hold. We build them." She reached across the table, gripping his hands like she was anchoring herself. "You're serious?" "I've never been richer," he said. They kissed there, softly, without urgency, just certainty. Around them, the cafe carried on, unaware it was hosting the quiet beginning of a shared life. Months later, Florence bloomed exactly as promised. Paint-stained mornings, long walks, evenings full of plans scribbled on napkins. When they returned home, it wasn't to Elias's old life or Lena's old apartment, but to something new they chose together. Years later, people would still talk about Elias Rowan's fortune. But those who really knew him knew the truth. The greatest thing he ever invested in was a love that never asked him to be anything other than present. And every morning, when Lena laughed from the next room, Elias knew, without question, that this was the ending he'd been waiting for all along.